in the literature, reflected in the artwork. And so you didn't see women in pants, suits, right? You saw the 50th look for a long time in our literature. And that was mom and dad. If there was a picture of a family, mom and dad, boy and girl, little boy in a suit and tie, and a girl in a dress, mama in a dress, and that went on for years. No, there's nothing wrong with looking like that, but it didn't reflect society. As society changed, they were still in the 50s when it was in the 80s. So helpful, that might help. Now, Knorr had personal opinions, and he gave a talk in California, and it was December 1st, 1951. Keep that in mind. And he was answering questions after his talk, I mean, from the platform, of course, during that meeting. And the questions had to do with, it was all planned ahead of time. And it was on seeing how they would react to the new teaching that was coming out. So remember, this is December 1st, 1951. And the first issue on disfellowshipping was March 1st, 1952. So he was kind of priming people for what was coming, and you wanted to see the reaction.
Whoop, it seems like we did lose Barbara there, but we'll try to get her right back here. There she comes. Back here. You're back again now, Barbara. Go ahead. Now, I've got to, can I put this,
yes.
I want to put something up here that you sent me, and maybe you can talk about this. This might be of interest to people. This is an old letter that you seem to have, and let me get it up here. Let me just try to find it here. All right, this right here. Can you tell us about this letter? That's an old tarnished letter.
Well, it's not a letter. It's somebody in the audience, a servant. So it probably was a congregation servant. Remember, it's 51.
Yeah.
Okay. And he's writing, he's taking notes of Knorr's answer to the question about this, because it says on the top there, Brother Knorr's answers to questions regarding disfellowshipping. And so he typed up his notes ahead of time. And when he died years later, these notes were part of his paperwork in his office. And it was his a close relative that shared this with me. She made a copy from, as you can see, the top of the paper, that this was a copy of what he typed up. And so he brought up these statements, and so we, all these years later, can read what he is saying about disfellowshipping and why the need for disfellowshipping.
Yeah, so he talks about back then when that was written, and you can remember this too, I'm sure, when a person was disfellowshipped years ago, they actually announced why they were disfellowshipped. Yeah. I'll tell you, it was really terrible. They would tell. I can remember as a young boy, I didn't know much about disfellowshipping, at 8, 9 years old. But I can remember, a brother getting up on the stage and saying someone's been disfellowshipped for adultery or bad conduct. They would mention these things, but of course they got away from that. But in that letter that I was reading, that's not a letter, but it's an article. We're having a little bit of trouble here with Barbara coming on. I'm not sure why that's happening here today, but all right. Oh, there we are. All right, so yeah, we're going in and out here, it's back and forth. Hello, Barbara?
Yeah, I'm here.
All right, let's see if we can get Barbara back on. Can you hear me now, Barbara?
Oh, I've been hearing you all along. I haven't had a problem.
Okay. All right, I just wanted to make sure. So actually, You do remember that when they actually announced that certain ones would be disfellowshipped for certain things they did? Do you remember that?
Well, for me, I became a witness in 50.
No, we're losing Barbara here for some reason. I'm not sure why this is happening, but we have been having these folks. I'm going to try to go direct here. I'm going to try to plug into my, try to go direct. Evidently, router. It's just starting to get to me here, but let's see if we can't, we'll get Barbara back. it appears that someone's been hacking into my router here. And can you hear me now, Barbara?
Yes.
Yeah, it seems like I think they're trying to attack me too. I know you had some hacking problems this week.
Yes.
But, so I have to tell you, these are Watchtower operatives. I did get a notice from my Xfinity here that there's been some intruders trying to come in and hijack my router. So I have a portable router here that I just came back on and got in. But they've been trying to destroy this program, Barbara. It's terrible. It's a shame that who else would it be? Why would someone want to do that? You know, when you stop and think about it. So
well, it's interesting. It's happening to you recent now and last week, because when I had two, and which tells you something, doesn't it? It tells you that we're successful.
Yeah. Now we won't get into it, but you were hacked this week. And I think I think they don't like the idea of you coming on and being live. They don't like the idea of me here at the 6 screens. We have been hacked into before, but I did get notice from Xfinity just recently here that it shows that someone's been trying to hack into the router. They're looking at that route. So I shut that router down, and now I'm on another router, so I was able to get in. It's nice and clear and working very good. So anyway, so I'm sorry, folks, for the little delay here we had. Thank you for being patient with us. But we'll be going forward tonight on this router. I don't think we'll have any problem because they're not going to get into this one. This is a very difficult one to get into. It's a private router that I have here in case for emergencies like this. All right, Barbara, so let's just go back. I'm sorry. Let's just reiterate a little bit here about Brother Knorr, who, of course, was one of the presidents of the Watchtower. And right around the time of his presidency, things seemed to be heating up about getting people disfellowship. Now, you were mentioning gatherings and how one young woman was involved in promiscuous sex. Now, they were did you say they were disfellowshipping her, or she did get disfellowship?
Well, I was using it as an example, whether she was or wasn't. I was using an example of the how when something happens in this organization, and years ago it reached the ears, something happened morally, especially morally, and they didn't like it when they heard about it. It was taken out on the entire organization in the fact of that, removal of roller skating parties, and looking at that as that's the way that it leads to being promiscuous, which is not true. And then coming down on it, and it was terribly, terribly discouraged. And it was a shame because it was a lovely way that the kids could get together, the young people, and even the parents were there. But that was an attitude of the organization for too long, to be involved in people's private lives and one size fits all. And that's not true. One size does not fit all. We're all different, and you can't take it out on an entire group because somebody falters. As well as you can't say that the whole group, condemn a whole group for actions that are not particularly scripturally allowed. They might not even be bad, but the whole organization suffers because of somebody's viewpoint at headquarters. And I have a very number of examples of this. The weddings, the kind of weddings were controlled because of an event that took place in Brooklyn, where the girls in the wedding party, the way that they were dressed, and that they were twirling umbrellas, walking down the aisle before the bride came down. And so from then forward, all the weddings had to be tightly controlled by a moderator, wedding moderator, who was a servant of the congregation. And yet other weddings went off, plenty of weddings. My wedding was just a very calm, and we were not dramatic. I was an ex-Catholic, and I've been to tremendously big weddings in the Catholic Church, and so I liked the fact that not to do that. But that was my personal opinion. As a Christian, I felt that it was overblown, but that was my personal opinion. It was no right for me to condemn other witnesses that had bigger weddings, and I didn't. And but the organization has, over the years, these are facts that involve, to one way or another, people's personal lives and the way that they view things that were bad. So Knorr was especially very harsh on how he viewed personal lives and other people's personal lives. He was against weddings, marriage, everything, like when he was single for so long, he was against, until he got married. And he was against higher education because he never was involved in higher education himself. In high school,
he was a kind of a fussy man.
Yeah.
Writing here, I do see, Barbara, too, that you wrote on a board they call JWN. It's a discussion forum online, and you did come across information on Knorr that you posted on there. Now, I found this very fascinating, some of the things that you were saying about Knorr. You were saying that, back in the 80s, 70s and 80s, some of the people at Bethel and even some of the governing body were found visiting gay bars. I mean, you still stand to hold that pretty true? I mean, what did you actually hear or see that actually could prompt you to write that? And you said that many of them were going to gay bars and some of them were engaging in homosexual acts. Did you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, I don't know a lot about it. I just know it happened. And they were all, because they didn't make an announcement to the entire Bethel family about it. As you'd hear more about this kind of thing privately. And so they, of course, disfellowship these people. And, well, you could understand because of the idea in this organization against homosexuality, the reason that they came down on this and they dismissed these people out of Bethel. But, we heard about masturbation, and Knorr, when he would have what they called a new boy talk. Of course, initially, when the new people came in, most of them were men. But after a while, there were more women coming in. But you still had these very straight-laced talks on a Monday night. Before the Monday night Watchtower study, we're preparing the Bethel family for the following Sunday. So after that, all those who were new at headquarters had to go to the new boy talk. And Knorr in the 50s and earlier, but I know through the 50s because my husband was there in the 50s. And he agreed with other people who said how the talks were they were very personal. And he said, see, we had a very close friend in Florida when we lived in West Palm Beach, who was in Bethel in the early 50s, before my husband was. Also, he went into circuit work. And then when his wife got pregnant, they eventually ended up coming to the West Palm Beach congregation. There was only one back in those years. And he and my husband talked about this, and how this man used to post on a discussion board, and he said that that Knorr would personally talk to the group of new boys. He gave some pretty silly sexual advice, and he was very alarmed about young men masturbating. He didn't hint. He said, he talked about this, and remember some of the younger men at that time in the 50s were actually leading and directing the organization in the 80s, and they had been in Bethel all those years, and they were still thinking like what was told to them by Knorr when they first came into Bethel. And I remember one time when specifically the Awake editor said something to me about this business on masturbating, and he absolutely he'd been in Bethel for 40 years, and this was in the 80s, and he said, or 30 years is okay. And so he said he didn't agree with the society's policy at all, and yet that policy was very strong in the organization about masturbation, and yet there were those who were headquarters who believed this was God's organization 100%, but they didn't believe some of the teachings of the organization. But I remember him saying this, and this is certainly a subject. You know, this isn't a Lutheran topic, that's for sure. But he said, as you get older, you notice things and you change your ideas and opinions of old-fashioned ideas. And he said, little babies masturbate. He said, this is just a human thing. Well, I was a mom then, and I certainly agreed. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Barbara. Yeah, it's.
Your
I can hear
picture is gone.
What I'm doing, I took my picture off for now. What I'm doing here, Barbara, and you just keep talking. I hate to confuse the audience here, but I'm changing routers around. Someone hacked into our router, and so it's creating issues on our telephone and everything else. So I'm working on that now. So I'm trying to work and do that at the same time. So you just don't want to talk about Knorr for a little bit while I just get this settled, and then you'll see me back on. But we can hear you. I'll be off. I'm going to take me off. You'll be solo. But we can hear you fine. So just keep going. Talk about Knorr. Talk about what he was saying, masturbation and all of that. Yes, we want to hear that.
So Knorr was quite a sexual prude, and many of those who married, and they were going there to Bethel, and they're young, inexperienced men, and they listened to this kind of personality from the president. He had personal opinions. It was his personality. He was very this fellow, he posted as Maximus, and he said that Knorr was very Germanic in his thinking, and he was a hard-nosed totalitarian from an old-fashioned community in Allentown, Pennsylvania. It was Maximus. I wrote this on the discussion board 18 years ago, and Maximus was around then. He's deceased now. But he said that Knorr's wife alluded to him that she lived a celibate life. And yet I know they loved one another, because I found by accident an old store desk in the old Squib building. When they had moved into there, they had put old desks that they weren't using into unfinished areas of the Squib building. And there were lots of personal cards and things. I think the desk came out of maybe some of the people who were on the floors of the old 24 building when they moved down to the lobby, the area where the lobby was, in the Squib building and the office buildings. So they had a lot of paperwork, a lot of stuff stored, and they threw them into drawers at the desks. So as I was working on the Proclaimer's book, and somebody told me that there was a lot of miscellaneous in these desks, so I went through them, and I found postcards that Knorr had sent his wife when he would go on zone trips and she or special trips too, other types of trips, assemblies. She didn't go with him, and he would send her a card, and they were very loving cards to her. So what their personal life was like, I don't know, but I heard from someone else is something similar to what Maximus said, and he was a close friend of the Knorrs. And but I heard, and I also talked to Arthur Worsley about this, who was at Bethel for so many years. That marriage really softened Knorr in so many ways. And I can remember when I became a witness, ballroom dancing was not as something that was looked down upon. Knorr took his wife dancing at the Rainbow Room in New York City, and he would wear a tuxedo, and his wife had a gown, a ballroom gown. And Max Larson and his wife would accompany them. Arthur said he was at the front desk, and they had assignments. Bethelites, the males had assignments, and who would be on the desk, the front desk, in the evening. And many times he was part of the. You have to understand how it was the rotation or so forth. But he would be at that desk, and Knorr and Audrey would be leaving, and then he was still at the desk when they came in after midnight. So yet ballroom dancing, when I became a witness, I studied with a woman who I met her door-to-door work, and then she became a witness, and she was an Arthur Murray a dance teacher, and she taught me how to ballroom dance, and she also taught Bethelites who would come visit out in Long Island and spend the weekend. And my father and mother our house had a finished basement, and it was quite big, and so we would have a dance. That was okay, but that's not how it is nowadays. Or I would say maybe in the 80s. I think it's loosening up a little, but ballroom dancing is not that much in as it used to be. But after he married, the prohibition against Bethelites marrying and staying at Bethel was lifted. The negative attitude in the literature towards marriage softened. And I know he put into operation his feelings about disfellowshipping, which was not known previously, because it involved a scandal that took place with people at Bethel. So, I mean, we just previously mentioned about the gay, Greenleaf's definitely was gay, and people had heard about that. That was a governing body member, and when we came to Bethel in the early 80s, I think we were there just 2 years when he was the announcement that Greenleaf's was asked to leave. That came when we were there, and but there were other circumstances involved with that too. There hasn't been a change about practicing homosexuality in this organization. If you're a non-practicing, that's the way it was ordered to be. If you were gay and you did not practice what is the issue here, then it was okay to be gay. So there were elders that were gay as long as they didn't practice it. And so what really got under Knorr's skin, though, and this was probably in the 1950, because he was in California and he gave the answers to questions after his main talk, and this was at a Kingdom Hall, and this is when he brought in the subject regarding disfellowship. And so why all of a sudden then, when people are people, and he was president of the organization for quite a while, why in 1947 did they scold the Catholic Church for disfellowshipping or excommunication? And then in 1952, it was part of the policy of the organization, one of the policies of the organization. Well, from my knowledge and what I was told was that there was a Kingdom Hall in the Brooklyn Heights congregation, and it was in the 107 building. That was that L-shaped building that had the garden in front, and it had a wrought iron fence around it. And across the street from the old building, Russell was in the 124 and 122 building. Anyway, so there was a Kingdom Hall in there. And so that's where the Bethelites, like if you were an older Bethelite, you could ask to be assigned to go to that Kingdom Hall. So you didn't have to travel on the subway or by car to a Kingdom Hall for the meetings in and around Brooklyn or the Bronx or so forth. So I knew different ones that were attending that they were older. They were in their 60s or 70s, or if you were ill, you could attend that one until you got better and you went back to your own Kingdom Hall. So there were definitely, this was, I bet you, 3/4 of that congregation were Bethelites. But in and around Bethel, there were, in Brooklyn Heights, there were witnesses living there. And a number of young Bethelites who were assigned, though, to the Brooklyn Heights congregation in the 107 building, they were engaged in wife swapping with couples who were not Bethelites. They were witnesses, but they were not Bethelites, which wouldn't make a difference. They were engaged in wife swapping. And when the fat hit the fan, Knorr was furious. And so here we have the March 1st, 1952 issue of the Watchtower coming out with disfellowshipping. So between, there was a real big change in attitude from that 1947 issue of the Awake, the January Awake, where they came down on the Catholic Church as excommunicating its people and mention it's pagan, and then they go ahead and introduce it because they've got problems. And, you know, the strangest part of the whole thing is they use scriptures to just justify disfellowshipping. And the very same scriptures they condemn the Catholic Church for invoking on to excommunicate, if they used any at all. So so he cleaned house, but so there was a reason for it, and it affected the organization all over the world, didn't it? Just like one act between two young people at a roller skating party did away with all the roller skating parties. And it may be silly illustration. I thought it was rather ridiculous when I heard that this was the reason, because we were part of we were young, and we had a son at that time who was around. We just moved to Tennessee, and we were here a few years, and so I think he was around 16 or so when they came down on roller skating parties, and it was very detrimental for the young people not to be able to get together. So it might have solved one issue, but then it brought forth other issues, as disfellowshipping does. So in 1951, before that Watchtower came out with that article, Knorr was giving this talk and answering questions about disfellowshipping in a congregation in California. And he gave the reasons for disfellowshipping. And the major reasons for disfellowshipping in why it was brought in, interestingly, is to do with moral reasons. And remember, as I said, Knorr was known for being a prude. Now, surely, yeah, I understand his feelings on this matter with the wife swapping. That's not it. I'm not for things that are not moral, but the problem was, to Knorr, this was extreme. To him, it was extreme because so everybody suffered, and he gave the reasons. And I don't mean that I agree. I don't want anybody to think that I think that immorality is okay. It's just we have to be adults about this, and one size doesn't fit all. And in his talk, and in his afterwards his questions, he mentioned moral reasons. Adultery or fornication are reasons for disfellowshipping. Stealing or drunkenness, he mentioned. And he quoted 1 Corinthians and 6:9-11. And he says Paul took action on this. So, a source, scriptural source is always used by the witnesses. They try to do. Anyway, then he said also there are spiritual reasons, and backbiting and causing divisions. Now, I was disfellowshipped for causing divisions, and in 2002 for going public about child abuse. And so he quotes two scriptures, Romans 16:17 and 1 Corinthians 1:10. And so, yes, causing divisions can be a problem. And they made it to be dramatic. In the Elders' Handbook back in those years, when I was disfellowshipped, there's a whole list of things under apostasy, and causing divisions is just one of them that you can be disfellowshipped for. And in my case, it was going public about that. And my husband's for not having me under control, and also a woman asked him at a circuit assembly about why I don't come, and he explained the issue of the child abuse, and she called the society, and in their eyes, because he explained, answered her question, then he was causing divisions. So that, there's so many ramifications on these issues. And backbiter, you have to be this pretty bad backbiter to get disfellowship. but they put that in there. And as adults, we know life is complicated and people are complicated. One size doesn't fit all. Let's remember that. And then Knorr broke down in his answers. He gave examples of the reasons for disfellowshipping, and he used Korah, rebelled against God's arrangement. Miriam, Numbers 12. She was cut off. She got a leprosy for 7 days. Moses pleaded with God for her life, and she repented. So there's an example of being cut off and then repenting, see? So disfellowshipping in this biblical case turned out good. So hopefully they think that disfellowshipping would turn out good if you repent. Then further example, sons of God, 2 Peter 2:4, angels who turned against him, put in chains of darkness. So then those who were closely affiliated with Jehovah's Witnesses, just like angels of God affiliated with God, if you turn against it, then you're going to be in darkness. You disfellowshipped. Sodom and Gomorrah, all of the city destroyed because men kept doing immoral things. Lot and his 2 daughters were saved. So those were his main examples. And as this paper goes on, remember, this is the reasoning of the times for a policy that still exists and is tragic in many, many ways. Next thing that in this paper that the listener, one of the servants, he wrote what he was listening to, and he typed it up, and here it is. Let's say 50, 70 years later. 70, and I'm reading what Knorr talked about back then. In the modern times, so we got examples in the modern times. So this is the example Knorr gave. An illustrated case in California. Remember, he's speaking in California. These notes come out of California. A bride and her husband bride, husband goes to prison, okay? So she's newly married, her husband goes to prison. The doctor in a congregation gives her treatment of some sort, doesn't say. This leads into committing adultery with this doctor. After Brother Knorr gave lecture on Jude in California, she confessed before Brother Knorr and about her husband she confessed before Brother Knorr and her husband of her illicit conduct with this doctor. Her husband knew nothing of this until this time. She wouldn't say who the doctor was. So that is modern time example of someone deserving to be disfellowshipped. And then it further says, in order to disfellowship anyone, you must have evidence, proof, and authenticity. Well, that's true. And by their standards, yes, absolutely. And so then there's scriptures, and it said Paul had authority, and Paul was really the one that took action on disfellowshipping, Knorr said. So this shows that this must be an official act. So this is just not a random act from one place to another, depending upon the elders and what it must be, a society policy. And then it goes on, and it has 4 other statements, and then it ends. There has adultery or fornication. There has to be a charge. It has to be an investigation. If a person doesn't confess his guilt, then out of the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses, It must be so. It must not be gossip, actually proof, not rumor. And mature spiritual brothers have to make the decision. So this is what he was talking about months before the article came out in the Watchtower on disfellowshipping in the organization, and that was in 1952. So so we know that they came down hard. This is past history, and we know that they haven't changed too much in putting these rules into place all these many, many years. Now,
I'll tell you what, Barbara, take a little break. My goodness gracious, you've been going here for a good 10 minutes, and I appreciate that. I got all the problems here straightened out. We got the router set up. But, yeah, no, we were hacked into. There's no doubt about that. I got notice from Xfinity. That's the Comcast. That's the company that I deal with here. But they said that somebody's been trying to hack in. And it only happens when we're doing the program. It doesn't happen during the day. I work on the internet all day long. But last Sunday, they started hacking into our program. And now when we were in here tonight, they were hacking into the program. So we straightened it out. I listened to the instructions and did what Xfinity told me to do. So we're back on track here. But I am running 2 routers just to make sure. They might try it again. But Barbara, just to skip beat here a little bit, do you mind telling us about you being hacked into this week as well?
no, I don't mind.
Let the people know what happened to you, because I believe Watchtower is trying everything they can to keep us off the air. Tell the people, Barbara. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't have any evidence that it was somebody who was associated with the Watchtower. All I know is I had a surprise when I think it was Tuesday, and well, it could have been Sunday too. I'm just not recalling. It was right at the beginning of this week, and I had a phone call from a lawyer, mind you, and wanted to know if about my troubles and how could he help. And he received an email, and this happened at 3:00 that afternoon. And apparently, I was having deep problems. So I supposed to have sent an email to hundreds of people and saying I need help. And it came from an email account that I frequently use. And so it said, I need help. That's all it said. It said, hi, and that kind of thing. And then if you answered back, then the next part was the individual said that, of course, it was supposed to be me, that how are you? And sorry I bothered you, but I'm on a trip going to surgery. And I have a niece, and it's her birthday. And I want to give her a birthday gift of $300. And I'm not in a position at that moment to do that, and I want to make her happy. And so I'm not reading this email, and I'm just from my recall. Then it said to get an Apple card and put it on the Apple card and send it. But some people got 3 actually when you responded back for the first 2, then you get the third one. Well, one individual responded and sent $300, Now, I can't say I've talked to everybody. I don't really know how many, but I know of one person who responded, and then that individual got another email saying that I needed another $300, and then so this individual then gave me a phone call, and I was just astounded. And as the afternoon wore on, I got more and more calls. I had 2 calls from 2 people I haven't talked to in probably 10 to 15 years. And their email was connected. I mean, it wasn't any password of theirs, but their email, we had email back and forth over a child abuse situation. So they got this email from me begging help and begging for money, and that I would be glad to pay back when I was in a different circumstance. So I was appalled. I have never asked for money, and I would not take money from people I wouldn't ask for money. I mean, if I was in dire straits and somebody out of the goodness of heart knew that it was desperation or something, that's entirely different. I've never been in that circumstance, so I never had to do that. And I was so upset over this. And so then a few days later, my email, the email that I used, the person who did this just messed up the email, and every name of everybody I've ever emailed through this, it all ended up in delete, and nothing in the inbox, just everything piled together. So it was a big mess trying to go through all of this. So now, then a few days later, I get which I found this morning. It came yesterday, but I didn't see it because anything that came in was put in delete. And so there's an immense amount of emails in delete, all mixed up date-wise and whatever. And the inbox is empty. And so our other junk is empty and all those things. So so I was looking to separate some of these emails and wanted to keep some because it says in 30 days it's all going to be automatically deleted. And I didn't want that. And so I'm looking at each one, and there was a lot of them the postmasters couldn't deliver because people have changed their email. So I had to go through those. What happened was I come across one this morning, and I was secondly shocked. And this was from some strange person who wrote me and told me that I had to send them money, or I was going to. They would release all of the names and the emails of everybody that I kept in my over the years. Well, I used this because it wasn't that I idly kept the names of people. I use it in research. I go back even to 2008, and if I need to, because I remember so many occasions, so many people over the years that I might need to talk to about a case or about some of the circumstances to do with Jehovah's Witnesses. And so this individual said they were going to turn this, if I didn't pay them over $600, and they thought that was a very nominal amount. They could ask for more, they said, but they were doing me a favor. It was $600 and something, and then that, and if I had 2 days to pay. Well, it came in yesterday, and I spotted it today, and so I don't have very much more time before they release everything to the public. And then they quoted some kind of a legal thing, which I have no idea what that was about, that I could be arrested if all of this is released. It was a threat to me And of course, they said, we're going to even release, or I'm going to release, don't try to find me, don't try to, all kinds of statements. And so I was appalled when I read this long dissertation to me. You should have read this thing, and what would become of me if I didn't pay this money. So I was threatened. It's almost like a ransom to keep my own stuff. But then they said, and the ugly things you have been involved with. I've been into your account for months now, and everyone's going to know what you do. I thought, okay, release this. You're going to find the ugly things I do over the years, which involve exposing Jehovah's Witnesses, the most boring thing to the world. And so they were assuming that anybody who has as many emails as I do must be browsing the internet, because that was stated that that they were involved with what they do is with people who have secrets, who browse the internet in the dark places of the internet. Well, I don't have time to do that, and besides that, I don't want to. And so I thought, well, this is going to be fun. Why now? Why something happens a few days ago and now, and then here Rick has problems, and but I have had advice since then, and the advice has been the fellow who will fix my computer, who, if there's a problem, I called him, and he said this is very common, and so that a particular account is not usable right now, and so he's going to come to the house and show me how to get that account back. I did change the password, but then I find out that even the warnings I was having about some of the issues on this, not my particular email address, but the whole company, that wasn't even true. And so they were priming me, and I wasn't seeing this because it wasn't going into delete. So it just got messier and messier. But I also talked to an ex-JW today who's an expert at all this. And he said, just ignore this. Because they can't get any money out of you. And he said, this type of thing, it's all sorts of threats that are going out to people. And one man wrote me back, one of the exes wrote me back, and he said, oh, you too? He said, I've been hacked many times. He said, what a problem. My attorneys told me, well, the attorney we use, not a personal attorney, but the attorney who recommend for child abuse cases. And he got this from me begging for money. And so he said they have this at their business. He said, we go through this constantly. So, there's a lot of people out there that are doing this, and they're certainly not affiliated with the witnesses. But what am I going to say? Did they want to see whoever did this? Did they want to see who the ex-JWs that I've been writing to over the years? I don't know. But I've never had this happen before. I hope it never happens again. If you're worried about your email, I don't know what else to tell you. If you want to write me and you're worried about it, what can I say? I can't stop. Maybe that's the idea. Maybe somebody in their communication department at headquarters decided to scare people to stop writing me or stop people.
Well, let me step in here, Barbara. Let me step in because I have to tell you, give you a little break here. My goodness, you're going a million miles an hour, but thank you for doing that. But let me tell you, and people are going to say, "Come on, Rick, you're always saying this," but I'm telling you guys the truth. If you're listening in here tonight, I was hacked into for the last, well, 3 times on our internet browser, and I got a message from Xfinity today, and also a message last week from them that someone's trying to hack into the browser. Now, I want you to put this in your pipe and smoke it. Why is it that during the day I have no problem with my internet service? The only times I have problems with it is when I'm doing live streaming here on the 6 screens. Come on, you don't have to be a detective. You don't have to go to FBI school to see what's going on here. We have Watchtower operatives that are trying desperately to take down this program. They do not like the idea that Barbara Anderson is associated with us. Now, I know many out there are going, "Oh, I don't know if I believe that, Rick." Look, I've been doing this program for 18 years, just about 18 years. And I have to tell you something. This is the way the Watchtower operates. Now, we had a man coming on, whether you wanted to believe him or not, it's up to you, but his name was Johnny the Bethelite. And he said, this is what the Watchtower does. They have pretty savvy internet people there that are very familiar with hacking. And they will go to wit's end to shut some of this stuff down. Friends, listen, this is a multi-billion, not million, billion with a B organization. When you have that kind of money and that kind of control to continue to receive money, you don't need the 6 screens of the Watchtower. You don't need Barbara Anderson coming on here in live time. Now, I'm sure they pick on other YouTubers too. And my heart goes out to anyone that has had this happen to them. But they hate the idea that in real time, we are getting thousands of people listening in from all over the world. And they hate the idea that in real time, people are talking about leaving the Watchtower and what's going on behind the curtains. This is very, very disturbing to the Watchtower Organization. So whether you want to believe it or not, I'm putting the blame. I won't say for Barbara, but I am suspicious Watchtower is trying to get her shut down. But I know they're doing it here for a fact. I mean, I'm not exaggerating. I'm not trying to sensationalize this. It doesn't matter. Look, I'm not monetized. I don't make a penny off this YouTube. So there's no reason why I'm trying to bring the numbers up. But I'm telling you, Watchtower does not like what's going on here. And Barbara Anderson is perhaps the largest or biggest apostate. I don't mean in a big way. I mean
I'm the littlest biggest apostate.
You're not a big heavy woman. I'm not saying that. I mean, I think that Barbara Anderson is the biggest apostate out there. Seriously. She was one of the first apostates I came across when she was on the Dateline program. That this woman is willing to spill the beans. Now, I know that, people listening to the 6 screens and, "Oh, Rick, you have Barbara on," but Barbara seems to go soft on the witnesses. Well, I understand this to some degree. Today, she didn't. She came down.
Well, I'm trying to be fair, Rick. Fair is part of the game, The facts are the facts. And I'm glad to say the facts, but you and I have talked about this.
Well, we've talked about this, Barbara. And what I find now, you were, I never was a Bethelite. I never was. But you were a Bethelite. And, there were numerous people at Bethel that you liked. And they were nice people. And all of us listening to this program, there were people in the congregations. I look back and I know people I associated with and went out to dinner with and was with from time to time at the meetings, talking to them. I liked a lot of the people. Of course, when you get disfellowship, you lose all your friends. But the point I'm trying to make here is, we all have I would think some good remembrances of the Watchtower. But I'm glad that, you have to understand where Barbara's coming from, too. She knew a lot of good people there, and there are people there that get it. They know the Watchtower is not right, but what are they going to do? Well, what are you going to do if you're given your whole life, you have no money, you have nowhere to go? Well, what are you going to do? Say you guys are rotten? Right now, I know. In fact, I'm not going to say who he is. I can't even tell what his position is, but he's a pretty high official of the Watchtower. I can't say too much because it'll disturb him. But him and his wife, they're in their 60s. They're in their 60s. They've been there for 40 years plus. And they went there when they were very young. They went there when they were in their 20s. And they gave their whole life, their whole way of doing business to the Watchtower. They can't leave. This man says he cannot leave the Watchtower. What is he going to do? He doesn't have anywhere to go to live. So you got to play it cautious. So how many PMOs are there? That's what I'm wondering. Even in the organization itself, there's plenty of PMOs really at the top. Well, Barbara, I'll tell you what. I mean, it's been a rough week for you, but I think it's amazing that you could come on tonight and tell your story. We've learned about Knorr, and you know, you really opened up tonight. We like that. Can I ask you a couple questions, and maybe even some of the audience if they would like?
Well, you can, but I want to show how the things you get in the, if you're a witness, most everybody listening here has read the Watchtower and Awake for years and years, and they don't know and understand that what you're reading is a personal opinion of somebody in the writing department, or maybe the end result of an argument that went on in the teaching committee over something. That's not unusual. And then they finally settle down to some sort of a doctrinal point or refine an issue. And so I think that that the folks need to hear about some of these people who make the calls on what we read in the Watchtower and the Awake that influenced our lives, and the kind of mentality they have. And I want to talk about one of them, and if you don't mind.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Barbara. Yeah, bring it up. Go ahead. You're on. Yep.
Okay. What I wrote was about societal sexual attitudes and gender issues of the 50s are still reflected in the organization in ways. And an experience that I was involved with, I think would be interesting. During one writing department staff meeting, they did this, I believe it was every Thursday, if I remember, every week on Thursday. An artist from the art department would bring his or her cover, the picture that would be on the cover of the magazine. Well, this one particular one, she was there and she brought her cover picture for the October 8th of 91 Awake magazine, and she left it for a critique. And one of the unmarried older senior writers objected to the picture and the featured articles. The proposed cover color picture illustrated a young woman standing in front of a large mirror. She was touching the mirror, which reflected back her image, and there also was an overlay of a small black and white image of a little girl, who obviously was the young woman as a child. The title under the picture was Healing the Wounds of Child Abuse. That was that article that started the revelations on what the Watchtower was hiding. But of course, that was we weren't blaming the Watchtower. We thought that was a refreshing article. Now, this is really, for me, when I was told about this, I was appalled. And of course, I was in the department at the time. So what was the objection that the writer had to the picture and the articles? This is what he said. Everyone knows that a little girl who is molested brings it upon herself by climbing onto a man's lap. It was a shocking statement to make. but it illustrates either one of two things. This man is a child molester, or he believes the rubbish of days gone by that women and children get raped because of something they have done. The next story is an example of a non-anointed GB advisor who fit the category of a worthless standard as a model for leadership. Don't forget that the anointed members of the GB, as seen by the adoption and continuance of corrupt policies, have also proven themselves a worthless standard as a model for leadership, for they assigned this man and others like him to positions which influence the public and private lives of over, at that time, 7 million Jehovah's Witnesses. That's how many when that article came out of Healing the Wounds of Child Abuse in 91. So at least once a month on a Monday evening after the Watchtower study, at Bethel, heavy. I explained that last time what a heavy is. As somebody's been Bethel years, has a lot of power, and is assigned to give a talk to the entire Bethel family. And so that's once a month. In 91, senior writer John Wischuk was assigned to give a talk about marriage. At that time, John was probably in his mid-60s, had never been married, and of course had little experience with children. He had a close-knit relationship with his mother, who lived, I believe, in Valley Stream, Long Island, about 30 miles from Bethel, and he went home often. When Joe was in Bethel, and my husband, in 1956, John was already there and had an important job. So when we went to Bethel in the early 80s, John welcomed us as friends, not newbies. It was really nice to be treated as a peer when I was invited to work 6 years after my arrival at Bethel in the writing department, where John and other old-timers worked. Everyone knew we had a son in Bethel, and because of being a mother, often I was asked for my opinion about different family issues. There wasn't any other mother in the whole department anyway. So that Monday evening after the Watchtower study, John was assigned to give a talk to the Bethel family. He opened his discussion on marriage by mentioning that he was not married, and then said what we were all thinking. Probably you're all wondering why I would be assigned to talk on marriage, he said to the Bethel family. He continued by saying something to the effect that the information he was going to share with us from the Bible wasn't his own. And one didn't have to be married to give advice on marriage if it was Bible-based. In those years at Bethel, there were many trained, capable men leaving to get married. Due to the tremendous expansion in the organization, many of these men were allowed to bring in their new brides into Bethel so they wouldn't leave, because they were necessary at this time, and they couldn't be. They were almost irreplaceable. So most of those marriages suffered extraordinary stress from the institutional lifestyle, and that's why they decided that the Bethel family needed to hear a talk on the subject of marriage. So they assigned it to John Wischuk, who never was married. Well, need I tell you that John's talk contained black and white opinions and statements. He spoke emphatically that Christian men have to do such and such, and Christian women have to do such and such. Well, does that work? And after hearing John's talk, Joe and I were not impressed. By that time, we'd been married 32 years and knew the talk would not help solve any marriage problems, especially the information about wifely subjection. Oh, John was he was adamant about that. The next morning, because of my nature, I'm a tease, but I do it when I want someone to, not always, but I want someone to learn about something. So what I did, and I knew John pretty well, but I didn't know some of what I'm going to say here. So I arranged with two other staff women, mature married women about John's age. They were married to heavies at Bethel. and they were in the writing department mostly as secretaries. And I asked them to wait outside their office door for John to walk by, because he always came the same way. And when he did, we started to tease him about his marriage talk, hoping to help him think outside of the box. At first he laughed and then became irritated, and just before walking into his office, he tried to put us in our place by saying, "You don't have to be married to understand marriage. Just follow what the Bible says." He gently but firmly shut his door to our soft laughter. It was Bethel, and there were rules that governed our behavior, so we weren't really doing anything. We knew the structure, and we knew how far we could go. So a few months later, I went to John's office for a reason something to do with the writing department. And when I lifted my hand to knock on his door, I could hear his voice loud and clear. And he was arguing with someone over the phone about education and witness children. As I turned to go, I heard the phone slam down, so I decided to knock. John yelled, "Come in." When he saw it was me, he said angrily, "I've had enough of this. I'm never going to write any more articles on marriage, children, and education, because apparently from the scolding I've been getting lately, I don't know what I'm talking about." Well, I certainly had to agree. I expressed my opinion. I left his office a bit shaken. I remember leaving John sitting at the desk with sort of a stunned look on his face after I told him how I felt. I wasn't angry, just sincerely open and honest about some very important advice found in the Society's literature, which was ridiculous. Privately, I had observed that the domestic recommendations given by some of these men reflected a 1940s, 1950s mentality, the same mentality that they had when they came to Bethel in the 50s. And they were young men then. Because of the confidentiality policy, few of the personnel in the writing department knew the names of the authors of any magazine article or book, including me. So I had no idea that John was writing many of these dogmatic, dictatorial Watchtower study articles, heavily sprinkled with scriptural texts about marriage and rearing children that frequently appeared in the magazine. Yeah, a man who was not married was giving advice about marriage. A man who did not engage in sexual relations, mostly, I hope he was single, but anyway, was helping to create policies about intimate behavior. A man who never reared children was given advice about child rearing. What madness! What madness! And we listened to this because we thought, these writers, they have, light. They have light coming from heaven, increased light. That's what they called it. It was just mindless justification for removing errors. That's what increased light was. At the time, we would get annoyed at some of the things we said, but we thought it was God's organization. Now we know better. How many divorces? Divorces, they always would say, we didn't have marital problems in the brotherhood. Yes, we did. In fact, the last time I looked at this closely, some years ago, when they were bragging, they don't do that anymore, but they used to brag about this. The marriages broke up just as frequently in the organization as they did outside the organization. It was that way. And so, but the writers painted a picture that didn't exist. 85% of our young people, and here it was in the 80s, they knew 85% of the young people were leaving the organization. But in the literature, oh no, you painted that picture. I've been saying this for weeks. Every time I get on here, it seems I'm saying this. The facts. These are the facts. This is not Watchtower truth, increased light. This is the facts of the matter. It's just humans operating a human organization, a corporation, that those corporate laws actually ran the organization because of all of the letters came from who? They don't anymore, but for all many years and years and years, all those BOE letters, body of elder letters, where did they come from? A corporation. That was their inside address. It was Watchtower of New York. That was his service department, Watchtower of New York. Writing department, Watchtower of Pennsylvania. So it was a corporation. And they found the scriptures they wanted to use. They just used eisegesis. They had their opinions, and they found scriptures to fit them. And we never stopped to look closely and do research. If you did, you didn't last in the organization. I just thought they did great research themselves at the time. I wanted to go to Bethel when we were invited. I wanted to meet these folks that were doing all this marvelous research and giving us the truth about what the Bible said. And I found out that it wasn't like I thought. And those who are involved in it, as Rick said, they get old there and they can't leave. There's nowhere to go. So the sadness that they must feel to support something like this must be awful. So I hope that helps. Now, if Rick hasn't got anything else to say, I particularly want to mention this. Rick doesn't know I'm going to bring it up, and it isn't that it's a very interesting thing about child abuse that we never talked about. And with child abuse, you think of the victim, the survivor. You worry about them. You blame the organization for covering this up. There's always that human element of trauma of what people have went through, and they suffer forever. Well, because of what happened to them, and because they never, it was never settled. It was never brought to the authorities, which now we're seeing some real movement about this issue in the organization as far as the perpetrators being arrested. So we're seeing movement. But recently there was an article. I live in Tennessee. I'm not a native Tennessean, and I'm born and raised in Long Island, New York. But this article caught my attention. It was a June 28th, 2023. This came out, and it refers to Tennessee. Now, this is not, this is not the biggest state. The article is the impacts of child abuse cost billions annually. Have we ever really thought of what this is costing the society of taxpayers, the state by state? Well, here's a breakdown, and it is in Tennessee. And this statement, I'm going to read some of these statements. I think they're going to blow your mind. When Joe read it, he was astounded. And because you never think about it. And so we should all be doing everything we can for more than the reason that I talked about, for many reasons. In Tennessee, the University of Tennessee, their findings was 1 in 8 chance that a child born in Tennessee will be a substantiated victim of abuse or neglect by the time they reach adulthood. So 1 in 8 chance. So new findings show that child abuse and neglect carry significant economic costs in addition to their devastating personal and social consequences. It goes on to say, the Tennessee Commission on Children and Youth says, finds that the lifetime cost of child abuse is over $285,000 per case, and that child abuse costs the state between $3.33 and $4.97 billion per year. This includes the cost of child mortality and premature adult mortality, decreased wages and workforce productivity in adulthood among survivors, increased medical costs both in childhood and adulthood, increased demands for special education, residential care costs of dependency and juvenile delinquency, and the cost of criminality in adulthood. Efforts to prevent maltreatment and help victims recover will not only decrease these costs, but also yield a lifetime of benefits, including greater labor force participation, improved population health, decreased rates of substance use disorder, lower incarceration rates, reduced demand for state services, and greater life expectancy. If you were God's organization, you would have realized it hurt the economic, social issues, whatever, in all walks of life. It even hurt the organization in so many ways that nowadays that's come to light what their policies were for years. It has resulted in a mass exodus and also resulted in many molesters entering the organization. So it hurts all, not only the victim, it hurts all the way around. It says economically, there is a strong case for additional resources being made available to help victims of child abuse and neglect receive therapy and recover, because it makes them resourceful and healthy adults. And it's maltreatment is divided into 4 types in the study. So, maltreatment is just not, and of course I shouldn't use the word just, is not only the physical, the sexual abuse. There are so many children in the organization that were physically abused, and the neglect. I saw that myself in the organization of people who came in who were absolutely neglecting. We studied with a man in West Palm Beach, and it was awful how he became a witness. And we did not know what was going on behind closed doors. And he beat those kids half to death. It was horrible. And when I found out what his wife was doing, I could hardly get over it. And so the Department of Child Services in Tennessee receives $1.35 billion in funding from state and federal funding and other sources. And most of that money goes into crisis management, residential placement, and foster care. Yeah, we can talk all we want about foster care and say, oh, well, there's foster care for these children. The money spent for foster care is absolutely unbelievable. It says it so per year. And what kind of care do they get? We can't wipe out all these problems. We know that, but we never think about the issue, and the results of this issue hurts us. If I come from a good family, no child abuse, it's hurting us if we keep it quiet. 91% of people still do not report child abuse in the family. It has not changed. Well, in the family witnesses, you can bet your bottom dollar that there are those who still quiet about this. And, the impact of this, it's so many aspects of a child's life, their health, their mental health, their future, their education, everything. And what do you have as witnesses? If you don't report child abuse in religion, the results are not good. These people who are traumatized as youths by molestation, and it's not reported to the authorities by these churches and Jehovah's Witnesses, the results are horrible. And that's some of my material that was that disappeared off of my website. There was the results. The results. Anybody who would read some of my stuff, they would be horrified when people told me what they went through. It hurt them, it hurt the organization, and it also hurt our whole country. So it's a bigger issue than we ever have thought about, and I hope you all appreciate.
Well, thank you, Barbara, for bringing that up. It is a big issue. It's a tremendously big issue. Child sex abuse messes lives up big time. Now, not only for the person that was abused, but for the husband, the wife, the family, the children. It affects people, affects families. It's got to be stopped. And we thank you for being a whistleblower. We thank you for coming on and wanting to spill the beans on the Watchtower. These guys are real culprits. And Barbara, I have to tell you, other religions, at least they acknowledge it. At least they acknowledge it.
Some do.
Yeah, most do. But the thing is, the Watchtower doesn't. And that's the issue. I know we had, a couple of months ago, in fact, probably about 6 weeks ago, we had Deborah Hines. Deborah Hines came on, and she was terribly abused in the Watchtower. And she told her story. And, she wasn't looking for money. She wasn't trying to sue them so that she could become a rich woman. She was really wanting to expose them. She just wanted someone to apologize to her. And that's the strangest thing. They do not apologize. They could save millions if they just came out and apologized. Why don't you think they apologize, Barbara?
Because they believe they're God's organization. It all wraps itself around belief. And if you believe something strong enough, you don't want people to think that there's a problem if God is directing you. I suppose that's the basic idea. But why do families not report it either? Not enough witness families. They don't want the reproach. This is the same argument. You don't want the reproach, but the victim is the victim. They should worry more about the victim than the reproach.
Well, we got JW World News coming up here next, but we're going to be talking about that $40 million lawsuit out in Hawaii.
Oh,
now,
yeah.
Now, I'm not, I don't think they'll get to 40 million, kind of like in Conti's case, but, Watchtower will come in and appeal it, but $40 million. And, when I was reading through the story and listening to all of the clips people have been sending me, that story is again the same old Watchtower story. They kind of told the parents to keep it quiet and don't say a thing because they're going to bring reproach upon Jehovah. But, enough is enough. This guy was getting away with murder.
It was awful.
It was an awful situation. So, see, but that's what they do. If they could just come out and say, look, and we acknowledge this was a bad man, and we apologize to you, the victim here. They don't do it. If they would do that, they could save millions. Do they have anyone with a business head? I mean, seriously, I'm beginning to think they're all a bunch of quacks, Jeez.
Well, when they made the decision, because they read into the scriptures something that wasn't there. So to report to the elders about something that happened to you in this organization, and not to the authorities. I mean, if you had your purse stolen, it's still a crime. Other people will have their purses stolen at the Kingdom Hall too. If you just go to the elders, it's a crime, no matter where you are. If it meets the requirements of law, and you should report it. Well, every state has requirements, and those requirements have changed over the years. And the fact of the matter is, more and more people see the cost to the society and the victims, and are involved in trying to make the laws better to help in cases like this. And so But you're never going to wipe it out. And but you do the best you can. And with the Watchtower, ignorance played a part. People who were making decisions didn't have children. Also, there's a great number of people that came in the organization over the years that practiced incest. That really astounded me. In fact, I studied with a couple. I said this a few weeks ago, and I did not know until years later. They had 2 children. I did not know that it was incest with his 2 little kids. So you don't know what goes on behind closed doors when you're studying with people. And you think that when they become witnesses, that they've changed their lives. And they look at things like the Watchtower says they ought to look at. You don't know that. And so you have this false view. I bet you the majority of witnesses who are active witnesses who love the organization have no idea about this stuff. And when they hear it from people like Rick, and when he goes to a Kingdom Hall and stands outside and whatever, the majority of people, they don't believe it. Oh, our organization is not, it doesn't protect pedophiles.
Well, but here's the thing. See, you're way more credible than I am. I get this image of, man, Rick sensationalizes and tries to bring people into his program. And, I've been getting that for years. But when you come on here, you offer something that is quite unique. People really, put trust in you. They love you. They look at you as a giant among journalism. I mean, if you don't think it's correct, you're not going to say it. So I appreciate that about you. So, when you come on here, and there's active witnesses listening in right now, as a matter of fact, I can see people coming in here, and they're in here. And folks, if you are an active witness, this woman knows what she's talking about. She has been brought through the mill as well. She has been disfellowshipped. Her son doesn't speak with her, but she has the inside story in the Watchtower. Mm-hmm. And listen, and I hope you're listening into what she's saying. She's not going to come on here and try to embellish or say anything that's out of.
I don't hate the Watchtower, and I don't hate the people. All I wanted was change to protect the people, and I was ignorant too. Like I said, I didn't know I'm bringing people in the organization, studying with them, helping them every which way we could. We helped them to assist them to be servants of Jehovah. And we did not know what we were dealing with or why they were coming in. And of course, they were all wonderful. There were wonderful people who had a great love for God and were disgusted with the Catholic Church or whatever church they belonged to. And this looked better to them. But usually they were troubled. I studied with mostly troubled people.
What we're going to do, we're running up. I'm going to give you about 4 or 5 more minutes, Barbara. Then we're going to go to JW World News. We got a bunch of programs lined up here. So take another 4 or 5 minutes, and we'll wrap it up. And we'll be seeing you in 2 weeks. But go ahead, finish up in 4 or 5 minutes, okay?
Well, that's basically what I wanted to say, that it's just a people organization, but we weren't wise enough to recognize what, and neither were those who were called into Bethel who ended up writers. They didn't go to school for writing, and they believed just like Ray France said, they believed what they were taught by others before them. And so then they carried on the message, or they redid the message for another generation. But the basics, and of course, what happened in the world influenced them, just like when we were talking about this, when the issues became touched the organization greatly, then they would, like Knorr would go all over the place in his head about Jehovah's Organization and disfellowship and clean it out. It didn't clean it out because you're bringing new ones in. Many of them are good people. Many of them weren't. And so, but we lived under this umbrella of thinking my husband would tell you the first one. He said, in meetings and judicial hearings, he didn't ask the right questions because he couldn't believe that one of Jehovah's Witnesses would do anything as abhorrent as what some of them were doing. So he said, if I'd have just asked the right questions of the children when they were brought in to a judicial hearing, and they would have spilled the beans. But he said, I couldn't believe that their father would do such things. See, because the magazines made us think one way, Jehovah's Organization. Yeah, I speak because I have been part of this organization in ways many haven't. Am I happy that I was? No. In many ways, yes. I had adventures that I would never have had in my life. But at the same time, no, not with this revelation. It could, child abuse, it could really sour you if you allow it to. And to lose our family over this because they believed the Watchtower before they believed us. Our son who wrote and spoke about the love he had for us, but we went public. And you're trained. We trained him not to go public. I mean, yeah, we did it. It continues. It just rolls on in this group and in the Catholic Church and in the Jews and in the Baptists and the Mormons and also in other secular organizations. We don't want to forget that. And we don't want to become either idiots over this. We don't want to change our lives that we become nutcases and forget to smile. We have to be balanced, and you have to work at that. And I certainly am working at that. The older I get, the more I have to work at that because I can't deal with. It's harder and harder to deal with the knowledge of what some people do to others, and I'm so fortunate. My family never had. We did not have this. And my heart just breaks when I think of what if this had been me as a child. Just put our feet in the shoes of someone else. And then your heart goes out to them. Isn't that what Jesus was supposed to be all about? I'm not pushing Christianity either. But isn't that what he's supposed to be all about? Wasn't Buddha? Wasn't all of these great religious leaders about making a better life and doing unto others? What about doing unto others? These are beliefs of Confucianism.
Well, I'm going to stop you. I'm going to say, Barbara, when you talk about the Watchtower, and you say you're not trying to push Christianity, but, they're pushing it. That they claim to be the only true Christians on the planet. That they claim that God works through them and nobody else. Everybody else has it wrong. So, this is very disturbing. Very disturbing. So this is how they've really captured an audience. That the witnesses believe that, we have the truth, but these guys are lying through their teeth. Barbara, you're a wonderful lady. You're doing a great job. I had so many questions to ask you, but next time around we're going to do it. But I have to tell you tonight, I'll tell you what I noticed tonight. I noticed something tonight that I haven't noticed in you. Now, I'm not going to say it's righteous indignation. I'm not even going to call it anger. Yeah. But I noticed tonight that you were a little more willing to really expose these bums.
Well, it's talking about them because they're real to me. I'm not telling other people's stories. I'm telling my story. I'm there hearing this from someone who is there. Some of these writers just opened up because I was a mom and also I was older. And they had to talk to somebody because as you get older, you feel the need to say what's on your mind when you're seeing such things that going on around you that you can't control. And that's the way with many of these men were older. Life didn't turn out. The new world wasn't there, and for them, and they were in their 60s at this time. So. It's not that I'm different. I've always felt strongly, but you also make this available. So since you make it available, you're doing a wonderful, wonderful service here for people to listen to what others say and who have accurate knowledge of what is going on. So thank you. So I didn't, I appreciate what you say about me. It's all part of life. And, we do what we do because we want very much to have others have a decent life. And, and, and the Watchtower has done a job on people's minds. They've done what you said. People have given up everything and they have nothing.
They've given up everything. Barbara, well, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
We appreciate you coming on. And, I have to tell you, we have to get your footprints in here. You have got a wealth of information. People hear this for the first time, but we gotta get your footprints in here so people can hear this for many, many, many years to come. A real Watchtower insider telling all. Thank you very much, Barbara Anderson. You keep standing tall. I will be in touch with you in the next week or so. And don't you ever give in, up or out. Keep exposing the Watchtower. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Rick. And if anybody out there thinks they can stop our voices, no, because we've put into place ways for the future that our voices will continue. Our words will continue. Well, I sure can't destroy us. They can do whatever they want, even physically. But both and I know that our words will continue for the future to help others to make sense out of the senseless Watchtower. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you very much. Well, there you go. That's Barbara Anderson. And how glad we are to have her part of our network here on the 6 screens. I think it's totally amazing that this lady's willing to come on. And as she's getting older, she's willing to share so many things that she experienced in the Watchtower. Now, tonight, she was very, very good. She was willing to really expose things maybe some of you folks have never heard of. And I first of all, I want to tell you folks as well, I apologize for the problems that we had in the beginning of the program. You see, some of the YouTube is messed up and goofed up. But what we had is we have hackers. People are trying to hack into my internet browser here, not browser, but my internet router. And they've been trying to do that for the last couple of weeks every time we do a program. But I have a secondary router that I am working. So I want you to know, I appreciate your understanding of it. When you're doing a live program, anything can happen. So I thank you for all of you folks understanding that. We're going to end this program. We're going to go to JW World News. That's the news the Watchtower doesn't want us talking about. But we'll see you there. And thank you for coming in to Watchtower Insider Tells All. Of course, that's Barbara Anderson. She'll be back with us in 2 weeks. We're glad to have her part of the 6 Screens Tele Network. Now stay with us. JW World News coming up next.